That night, when her husband didn't come home, she didn't panic. She didn't call his friends. She didn't call his family. She waited. 6 hours passed before she dialed the police. Just enough time to sound worried. Just enough time to sound innocent. When officers arrived, she was already crying. Her voice shook. Her hands trembled. Everything about her looked real. But there was one detail detectives couldn't ignore. If she was truly terrified, why was her story so calm? So organized? So perfectly timed? Because that night didn't make her a victim. It made her the keeper of a secret she never planned to share. From the outside, their marriage looked flawless. They lived in a quiet neighborhood where people waved from their driveways and weekends smelled like fresh-cut grass. Neighbors described them as private but polite. No shouting. No late-night arguments. No police visits. Just a husband who worked long hours and a wife who always smiled. On social media, they looked even better. Vacation photos. Anniversary dinners. Soft captions about love and loyalty. If you didn't know them personally, you would assume they had everything figured out. And that was exactly what she wanted people to believe. Friends often said she was the calm one. The understanding wife. The kind who never complained about late nights or missed dinners. When her husband stayed out late, she never questioned him in public. When plans changed, she adjusted without protest. But behind closed doors, the rules were different. She needed to know where he was, who he was with, why he was late. It never sounded like suspicion. It sounded like concern. Just checking on you. I worry when you don't text. You know how anxious I get. And slowly, without realizing it, he began explaining himself for everything. What he didn't notice was how carefully she watched. How she remembered small details. How she reacted when something didn't match what she expected. There were no explosive fights. No dramatic scenes. Instead, there was silence. Long pauses. A quiet tension that never showed on camera. People close to them noticed something else. She spoke for him. Finished his sentences. Corrected small details in stories he told. It looked harmless. Even loving. But control doesn't always raise its voice. Sometimes it whispers. Still, no one thought anything was wrong. They attended events together. Smiled together. Left together. When friends asked how marriage life was, her answer was always the same. We're good. Really good. And her husband would nod. Because what else was he supposed to do? In public, she was supportive. In private, she was observant. Nothing escaped her attention, not his tone, not his habits, not the way his routine slowly began to change. And when it did change, she noticed immediately. He started coming home later. Spending more time on his phone. Growing quieter. She didn't accuse him. She didn't confront him. She adjusted. And that's what made the marriage look perfect. No drama. No noise. No visible cracks. Just a woman who seemed patient. And a man who seemed tired. No one saw danger in that. Because no one ever expects the perfect marriage to be the most carefully constructed lie of all. The night he disappeared started like any other. There was no argument. No slammed doors. No last words filled with anger. Earlier that evening, he told her he would be working late. His voice sounded normal. Calm. Almost tired. She responded the same way she always did, quietly, without questions. Outside, rain began to fall. Light at first. Then steady. By 10:30 p.m., his phone was still active. Location data later showed him moving along his usual route home. Nothing out of place. Nothing alarming. Then, at 12:41 a.m., everything stopped. His phone went silent. No calls. No messages. No movement. According to her statement, she tried reaching him several times. She said she assumed his phone had died. She said she told herself not to worry. But phone records would later reveal something different. There was only one call. One outgoing call from her phone. Placed at 1:47 a.m. It rang for 22 seconds. Then she stopped trying. She didn't text. She didn't call again. She didn't leave the house. Instead, she went to bed. Hours passed. By morning, the rain had washed the streets clean. The world outside looked ordinary, peaceful, nothing like the quiet panic that should have filled that house. She woke up, made coffee, and waited. When she finally called the police, her voice was controlled. Concerned, but not frantic. She explained that her husband hadn't come home and that this wasn't like him. Officers arrived and asked routine questions. When was the last time she saw him? Did they argue? Did he mention meeting anyone? Her answers were precise, almost rehearsed. She said he left in a good mood. She said they were happy. She said there was no reason for him to disappear. But one thing stood out. She never asked where the search would begin. She never asked how they would look for him. It was as if she already knew. And somewhere, far from that quiet house, a truth was already waiting, hidden in the dark, untouched by rain, and silently counting the hours until it would be found. In the beginning, the police believed her. Missing person cases often start the same way: confusion, fear, unanswered questions. And she fit the role perfectly. A worried wife. A quiet home. No signs of struggle. Detectives checked the house first. Everything was in place. No broken objects. No blood. No forced entry. It supported her story. Her husband had simply vanished. Officers began retracing his last known movements. They reviewed traffic cameras, gas stations, intersections along his usual route home. For hours, nothing appeared out of the ordinary. Then one camera changed everything. At 12:58 a.m., her car was seen leaving the neighborhood. Alone. Not heading toward the main road, but in the opposite direction. When detectives asked her about it, she paused. She said she couldn't remember leaving the house. She blamed stress, lack of sleep, shock. It sounded reasonable at first. But investigators don't rely on memory. They rely on patterns. They pulled phone records next. Her phone and his phone were moving separately that night. His stopped. Hers did not. Cell tower data placed her miles away from home during the exact window when she claimed to be asleep. Still, she remained calm. Too calm. One detective noted something else. She never interrupted. Never asked what evidence they had. Never demanded updates. She listened carefully, absorbing every word. It felt less like fear, and more like calculation. As the search expanded, volunteers combed nearby areas. Officers checked wooded roads, empty lots, and stretches of highway where accidents sometimes go unnoticed. That's when a patrol unit found something. Tire marks leading off a back road. Fresh. Partially washed by rain. Nearby, they recovered a personal item, something unmistakably his. When detectives returned to her with the discovery, her reaction was delayed. 3 seconds. Her eyes shifted. Her breathing changed. Then the tears came. But by then, the investigation had already taken a turn. This was no longer about finding a missing man. It was about understanding why the person closest to him was standing in the middle of every unanswered question. By the 4th day, the tone of the investigation had changed. This was no longer a missing person case. It was a puzzle, and every piece seemed to point back to her. Detectives stopped asking open-ended questions. They started asking specific ones. Timelines. Distances. Exact words. She answered carefully. Too carefully. Her story was consistent on the surface, but when investigators pressed deeper, small cracks began to appear. She said she went to bed shortly after midnight. Phone data showed movement well past 1:30 a.m. She said she was home all night. Cell towers placed her miles away. She said she was too stressed to remember details. But she remembered times, conversations, and emotions with perfect clarity. Then came the digital evidence. Investigators obtained her search history. The room went quiet as the words appeared on the screen. How to clean blood from fabric. How long before a body starts to smell? Can bleach remove DNA? She claimed the searches were unrelated. Stress-driven curiosity. Crime documentaries she watched late at night. Detectives didn't argue. They let the silence do the work. Hours later, they confronted her with the CCTV footage again. Frame by frame. Timestamps enlarged. Her car leaving. Her car returning. She watched without blinking. When asked why she drove in the opposite direction that night, her answer changed. She said she needed air. She said she felt overwhelmed. She said she didn't know where she went. But investigators did. Her route led to a remote stretch of road, an area they had already searched. An area where the tire marks were found. When told this, her composure finally slipped. Her hands tightened. Her jaw set. She asked a question she hadn't asked before. Did you find him? That was the moment detectives exchanged looks. Because innocent people ask when someone will be found. They don't ask if. From that point on, every answer she gave felt defensive. Every tear came late. Every emotion felt measured. The interview ended without an arrest. But the truth was already cracking through the surface. What remained wasn't a mystery about where he had gone. It was a question of how long she could hold together. A story that was collapsing under the weight of its own precision. And somewhere, in a place she thought the rain had erased, the final piece of the truth was still waiting to be uncovered. The body was found on the 5th day. It wasn't far from where investigators had been searching, but it was far enough to be missed at first. Hidden beyond the tree line, just off a narrow back road where headlights rarely reached. There was no sign of robbery. No scattered belongings. No evidence of a struggle with a stranger. Everything about the scene suggested something else. The medical examiner determined the time of death to be late that night, the same window when her phone had gone silent on the records. The cause was blunt force trauma to the head. One strike. Precise. Not rage. Intent. Back at the house, detectives noticed what was missing. A tool from the garage. One she had previously mentioned casually as something her husband never used. It was never found. When investigators brought her in again, they didn't raise their voices. They didn't accuse her directly. They presented facts. The location of the body. The timeline. The missing tool. The phone data. Her reaction wasn't shock. It was relief. For the first time, she spoke without crying. "I didn't mean for it to go that far," she said. The room went silent. Those words changed everything. She hadn't asked how he died. She hadn't asked what happened. She assumed responsibility before anyone placed it on her. Detectives pressed further. She admitted they had argued that night, something she had denied repeatedly before. She said he wanted to leave. Said he was tired of being watched. Tired of explaining himself. She claimed it was an accident. A moment she couldn't take back. But accidents don't erase phone data. They don't explain calculated delays. They don't leave search histories behind. As the interview ended, one detective wrote a single line in his notes. This was planned. Outside the station, the story was still unfolding for the public. But inside, the case was already clear. The woman everyone trusted hadn't lost control. She had lost patience. And the truth she worked so carefully to hide had finally stepped into the light. The courtroom was silent when the verdict was read. No gasps. No whispers. Only the slow scrape of a chair as she stood to face the judge. She didn't cry this time. The evidence had spoken clearly: cell data, surveillance footage, digital searches, and her own words in the interrogation room. Piece by piece, the story she had carefully built collapsed in front of everyone who once believed her. Prosecutors described a crime driven not by rage, but by control. A marriage that looked peaceful from the outside, but was slowly suffocating on the inside. They showed how patience became planning and how silence became strategy. When it was her turn to speak, she looked straight ahead. "I loved him," she said. It was the same sentence she had used with police, with friends, with the media. But love, the court ruled, does not come with timelines, rehearsed tears, or deleted histories. The judge sentenced her without hesitation. As she was led away, the gallery remained still. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked the same question the public had been asking since the beginning. How did no one see this coming? The answer was simple. Because the most dangerous lies don't scream. They whisper. And the people who tell them don't look like criminals. They look like someone you'd trust. Someone who smiles. Someone who waits. And someone who knows exactly how long to wait before making the call.